Women's History Month. And to do that, we have asked our own Dr. Tara Melnick to speak with us about notable women in Tennessee history. Dr. Melnick first began teaching history here as an adjunct professor in 2013. She became full-time faculty in 2017. Before coming to Cumberland, she was a historic preservation specialist with the Nashville Historical Commission, and before that she had worked with the Tennessee Historical Commission and the Historical Commission for the state of South Carolina. She currently serves on the Tennessee State Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. She published a book called New Deal, New Landscape, the Civilian Conservation Corps in South Carolina State Parks. She contributes to the Tennessee Encyclopedia. There are several seats up front. Come on. She is frequently invited to present on topics of American history at regional and national conferences. She serves as the faculty advisor for Pike Emu, the Social Science Honor Society, and is active in the campus chapters of Phi Alpha Theta and Omicron Delta Kappa. Let's welcome Ms. Dr. Tara Melnick.
Thank you. Let's see if I can move this without knocking everything over. Nick told me I had to use the mic, so this is going to be kind of awkward for me, but we'll make it work. All right. So I am Dr. Melnick. I think I see lots of familiar faces in here. I've got lots of my current students and a couple of former students, so thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I've titled my talk, The Triumph and the Struggle, Notable Women in Tennessee History. This quote, The Triumph and the Struggle, is from one of the women that I'll be talking about, so I'm going to ask you at the end to kind of guess which one you think this comes from. But I'm really glad to be here today. This is Women's History Month, and so I think it's a good way to kind of just celebrate. This is not an in-depth look at anything. It's just kind of some highlights of people that I think are significant in our state's history. So the first one is our First Lady. She's the very First Lady of Tennessee. This is Catherine Sevier, also known as Bonnie Kate Sevier. She was the second wife of the Revolutionary War hero and our first governor, John Sevier. She was born in 1754, and we don't really know a whole lot about her early life, except for this legend surrounding how she meets her husband. The story goes that in 1776, the year of the Revolutionary War, that she was milking a cow outside of a fort when Native Americans attacked the fort. And so she runs back to the fort, and the fort doors, the gates have closed, and she can't get in, and she tries to scale the walls, the palisade walls of the fort, when a young man gallantly reaches across the wall and pulls her to safety. And of course, you know, that's their meet cute. And the rest is history. She has now met her husband. Well, it's a great story, but it's really probably just a story. Granted, John Sevier may very well have saved her life, but at the time he saved her life, he was married to somebody else, and she was a young teenager. So it would be another 20 years before they would actually get married. And it's really one of those legends that we read about in some early Tennessee histories, but the Sevier children, their children, don't really tell that story in their writings. So there's some questions about that. John Sevier's first wife does pass away, and he will eventually marry Bonnie Kate Sevier right before he leads the Over-Mountain Men across the mountains into North Carolina. And legend again has it that she melted down silverware and other items in their home to make the mini balls, the balls to put into the muskets and things like that. While he is gone doing his army stuff, she helps raise his 10 children from his first wife. She has 8 more of her own, so she raises their 18 children. She becomes the First Lady when Tennessee becomes a state in 1796. But both John Sevier and Kate Sevier will die at 20 years apart in Alabama. That picture in the middle is from 1922, so about 100 years after they pass away. The state of Tennessee has their remains moved from Alabama and brought back to Tennessee, and they are both buried in Knoxville, which had been the state capital when they were governor and first lady. The picture on the far side there is a miniature portrait. We are not sure that that is Bonnie Kate Sevier. That may very well be their daughter, but it is a likeness of the women of that family. So we think that may be Ruth, but it may also be a picture of Bonnie Kate. We don't have a lot of images of her from life at all. The second woman I want to talk about is Nanya. She is known as the beloved woman of the Cherokee, and she's a contemporary of Kate Sevier. She lived at about the same time. She lives down in kind of the Chattanooga area, the Tennessee, Georgia border, and by the time she is 16 or 17, she is married with 2 children. And her first husband was a Cherokee who is killed in battle. And during that battle, after he falls, she picks up his gun and continues fighting in the battle. And for her heroism and her efforts, she is given the title Beloved Woman, which is a significant title in the Cherokee culture. She becomes a tribal leader. She will marry an Anglo man, a Euro-American man named Bryant Ward, and that's when her name is anglicized as Nancy Ward instead of Nanya. And they have a child together. Bryant Ward also has a white wife, a legal wife, so this is a kind of extra legal marriage situation. He does return back to his white family, but this is where she gets her name, and that's kind of how we know her now in Tennessee is Nancy Ward. During the years of the 1760s and 1770s, as the United States is leaving its colonial period, fighting a revolutionary war, trying to become its own country, we're not just fighting the British, there's a lot of fighting between natives and the settlers. And so there is a lot of tension between the Cherokee and the settlers in Tennessee as well. The Cherokee will capture several white women, one of whom is named Lydia Bean, and Lydia Bean and Nancy Ward will become friends while Lydia Bean has been taken captive. Nancy Ward is credited with saving Lydia Bean's life because many of the Cherokee just wanted to kill her as a prisoner of war. Lydia Bean will teach Nanya about dairying, using cows for milk, and how to process the milk. And so dairy cattle will become a major feature of Cherokee lifestyles in the early part of the 19th century, in part because of this relationship between Nancy Ward and Lydia Bean. Nancy Ward died, we think, around 1825. Before 1825, she is believed to have been somewhere between 90 and 100 years old. In her last years of her life, she is plagued by recurring nightmares. These nightmares, she will say, show her people being taken on a long walk. If you know anything about American history, you probably know that, within 10 years of her death, her people are taken on a long walk. We call that the Trail of Tears. And so it is believed that she had these visions of what was going to happen to her people. She is buried near Chattanooga. I have been to her gravesite. If you get down there, it's out in the middle of nowhere. But she is one of the most significant early Tennessee women in our history. Some other early women are this mother and daughter pair. This is Septima Sexton Middleton Rutledge. She has one of the very best names in American history, I think. And her daughter Mary. She's Septima Sexton, her daughter is Mary. But Septima Sexta, those are Latin for, somebody know? 7 and 6. She is the 7th child and the 6th daughter. I think they ran out of names. But she is born in South Carolina. She is the daughter of one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. She marries a man who is the son of a different signer of the Declaration of Independence. They are second or third cousins. They are related, and they have known each other since childhood. They marry very young. She's about 16 when she gets married. By the time she is 20, they have moved to what we would call the Tennessee frontier. Her family and his family have been given land grants in Tennessee, and so they are coming to Tennessee to kind of make their own way. Their land is kind of down in the Winchester, Tullahoma area. They own tens of thousands of acres in that area. But Septima Sexton, Middleton, Rutledge looks for more of a urban lifestyle. Now, Nashville in 1800 was not anything like an urban lifestyle, but it was much more urbane than living way out in the middle of the Tennessee frontier. So they moved to Nashville and built a house just outside of downtown Nashville, and a portion of that house actually still stands if you go to Nashville. They built a house that overlooks the Cumberland River, and she's going to become one of the leading ladies of Nashville. She is a personal close friend of Rachel Jackson, for example, so she's definitely up in Nashville society. Her daughter, Mary, is born when she's 18, so they're not very far apart in age, really, and as Mary grows up, she will marry a man whose last name is Fogg, Hume Fogg High School. This name should work for him. But they work together on a lot. As adult women, they work together in Nashville's educational system, in providing for orphans, in lots of different ways of uplifting education in Nashville. In 1826, Septima will lose 3 children in the summer of 1826, including her youngest 2 children, who will die in while they're on vacation in Saratoga Springs, New York. And it's this loss that really will begin to give her a heart for children, of all children. She wants to help all children. She later will lose a grown daughter in 1841, who will leave behind 3 young children, and Septima will take those children in, and then she really becomes interested in the plight of orphans all over Nashville, and she will open Nashville's first orphanage. Both she, her husband, her daughter, and her daughter's husband are all buried in Nashville in the Nashville City Cemetery. And if you know anything about Nashville, the Rutledge Hill area of Nashville is developed on the land that was originally theirs. This woman is Fanny Wright. This is Frances Wright. She is not a Tennessee native. Very few of these early people are. She's actually a Scottish immigrant. She comes to the United States from Scotland. And she actually comes as part of the Marquis de Lafayette's entourage as he returns to the United States to kind of give his farewell tour. She and her family were personal friends with the Marquis and his family. And so as part of his entourage, she's going to meet, some people like Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. And while she's meeting with these people and traveling throughout the United States, she becomes exposed to the idea of American slavery. And she is dismayed by what she sees. She is determined that slavery should be outlawed, and she becomes an ardent worker toward abolition. She will talk to Thomas Jefferson about her ideas. She'll talk to Andrew Jackson about some of her ideas. And apparently they're polite, but she's a young woman in her 20s, and they're just kind of like, oh yeah, that's nice, go away. They're so polite but dismissive, let's say. She does discuss with Andrew Jackson her ideas for what she calls a utopian community, similar to a community that had been set up in New Harmony, Indiana. This idea of gradual abolition. So we're not going to just free the slaves, we're going to gradually free the slaves. We're going to help them become more self-sufficient, be able to work on their own, and then we can give them their freedom. With Andrew Jackson's encouragement, quite possibly because he probably owned some of the land, Dr. Cheatham can correct me if I'm wrong. She does purchase 300 acres in West Tennessee, over kind of near Memphis. She also is going to purchase 30 slaves. And the idea here is that the slaves will then work toward their freedom. They will eventually earn their freedom, and she can set them free. And she wants this to be a demonstration community. She wants to not just do this for these 30 people, but this is something that can then be adopted nationwide. She has some health problems. She has to return to Europe. And while she's gone to Europe, her community, known as Neshoba over in West Tennessee, basically falls apart. It is not well received by most white Tennesseans of the time. And Frances Wright also has some ideas that were, shall we say, progressive for the time. Things like free love and women voting, and just some things that most Americans were not ready to accept at that time. She does return in 1828, finds her community pretty much in shambles, and she takes her 30 slaves and goes to Haiti. And not much is known about what happens to those slaves after she takes them to Haiti and frees them. She herself will return to the United States, but not to Tennessee. She goes to Indiana. She goes on what was then called the speaking circuit. She travels around the country giving speeches. She is an ardent abolitionist, an ardent feminist, very unusual for her time. She eventually will marry a French doctor and have a child, but her doctor husband does not like her work schedule or some of her more feminist ideas, and they do not stay married. She will die in 1852, and she dies in Cincinnati. I do love this quote. This is something she said in 1829. Your spiritual leaders caution you against inquiry. They tell you not to read certain books, not to listen to certain people. Beware of profane learning. Submit your reason to them, and receive their doctrines for truth. Such advice renders them suspicious counselors. That kind of gives you an idea of who she is. Alicia Hayes Acklin, probably the wealthiest woman in America in the 19th century, and probably the best known Tennessee woman in the Civil War. She is a daughter of the Hayes family. That's her maiden name. She's related to President Rutherford B. Hayes, for example. She, at 22, marries a man named Isaac Franklin. He's 50, she's 22. He is a wealthy plantation owner. They will have 4 children together. All of those children will die as children. And then her husband dies after they've been married 7 years. So she's 29 years old. She's outlived her husband and 4 children at that point. But she is left with over $1 million in property. Plantation property in Tennessee, in Louisiana, and in Texas, and about 750 slaves. And that is a huge number of enslaved people. A few years after that, she's going to marry a man named Joseph Acklin. He is a lawyer. He's from Huntsville, Alabama, and she makes him sign a prenup. She is going to protect her own property. They begin building what they're calling their summer home in Nashville. If you've been to Belmont Mansion, that's their summer home in Nashville.
Wow.
They built it, completed in 1853, and then they updated it in 1859. The house has 36 rooms and over 10,000 square feet of living space, and that doesn't count the basement service area. During the Civil War, her husband Joseph will go to Louisiana to manage their Louisiana plantations. He will die in 1863 in an accident. Alicia will stay in Nashville except for running a trip to basically run through the lines to make sure her cotton crop gets sold. She saves her cotton crop from being confiscated by Yankee soldiers and sells it to the English for about another $1 million. She'll come back to Nashville after the Civil War briefly, and then she'll remarry at age 50 to a Nashville doctor. They will stay married for about 20 years, but then she leaves Dr. Cheatham in Nashville and moves to Washington, D.C. with an adult child. And she will die in 1887 in New York City, but she is buried in Nashville in Mount Olivet Cemetery with 6 of her 7 children, I think, are buried with her. Oh, no, 9 of her 10 children, 6 of whom died before she did. These are 2 of the earliest Fisk Jubilee singers. They were in the first group of Jubilee singers at Fisk University, a singing and touring group designed to raise money to save the brand new African American school in Nashville. Ella Shepard and Maggie Porter were both born into slavery in Tennessee. They're both born in the 1850s, both the children of slaves. Ella Shepard was purchased by her father. Her freedom was purchased, and she is taken by her father to Cincinnati before the Civil War, where she is able to study music, although her music teachers make her come at night and use the back door. They don't want anyone to know that they are also teaching a black girl. But her talent was such that her music teachers thought that she needed to continue with her training. The other woman is Maggie Porter. And Maggie Porter was actually a Lebanon slave. Her family is from here in Lebanon. She was enslaved here. Her owner will take her mother, and a couple of siblings to Nashville during the Civil War. The Civil War, during the Civil War, Nashville was occupied by Union troops, and so it's actually a very safe place to be. But anything outside of Nashville was still considered kind of territory in war. Her owner will then take her mother and siblings, or a sibling, away, and so he's kind of using them against one another. If you don't run away, then I will reunite your family after the war, kind of idea. But after the war, Maggie Porter will enroll at what was called Fisk Free Colored School, now Fisk University, and she will become one of the Jubilee Singers as well. Both these women will be recruited by their choir director to join the choir and to go on this tour. He creates the Fisk Jubilee Singers. They will travel all over the country and Europe, raising money for Fisk. Ella Shepherd was the group's pianist, and usually their stage director, George Wright, was a white man, and he did not want to direct the African American choir, so she does both the accompanist and directing. Maggie Porter is the prima donna. She is the soprano above all sopranos, very, very gifted musically, but apparently she also knew it. She just basically told them, you can't do this without me, and so I kind of get my way. After they tour Europe, they come back to Nashville. Ella Shepherd will marry Minister George Moore. They will move to Washington, D.C. for a time, but then return to teach at Fisk in Nashville. Maggie Porter will marry a fellow singer named Daniel Cole, and they will form their own touring group, and they also call it the Jubilee Singers. And they will travel all over the United States entertaining. She is bound and determined never to come back to the South. She is dismayed by the lack of accommodations in the South for African Americans, but she does eventually return to Nashville in 1931 for a Fisk reunion. And she will die in Detroit in 1942. She's the last of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. But I think her Lebanon connection is really, really an interesting one for us here. Another important Tennessean is Ida B. Wells. And those of you that have had me in class have heard me talk a lot about Ida B. Wells already, but she was actually born into slavery as well. She was born in Mississippi, but just south of the Tennessee border, and she will move as a child to Memphis. She does study at Fisk for a summer to become a teacher and goes back to Memphis to teach, but will also become a journalist with her minister's newspaper. He owns a African-American based newspaper. As part of her journalistic career, she will report on lynching, beginning with the deaths of 3 of her friends, African-American merchants who were lynched because of their competition with white merchants in the Memphis area. She writes about this in her newspaper, and her newspaper office is looted and demolished. She will leave Memphis and go to Chicago to continue her career. She becomes best known for what is called her crusade against lynching, but her work in advocacy for African Americans, particularly African American men who were threatened by lynching. I'm not going to talk about all of these women, but these are just some of the faces of the Tennessee suffragists. I hope that you know that Tennessee makes the perfect 36 in the passage of the 19th Amendment, and it is through the work of many, many Tennessee women that women get the right to vote in the early part of the 20th century. We have here Nashville's Ann Dallas Dudley, Amelia Tennant, Frankie Juno Pierce, Chattanooga's Abby Crawford Milton, Knoxville's Lizzie French, Sewanee's Sarah Barnwell Elliott, and Memphis's Mary Church Terrell and Elizabeth Avery Merriweather, all of whom are essential in the passage of the 19th Amendment. They all worked tirelessly to prove that women were able to cast their votes. Another important Tennessee woman during this time is the one in the bottom corner, kind of off by herself. This is Josephine Pearson. She is a Gallatin native who attended Irving College, which was outside of McMinnville. She lived in McMinnville for a while, and then she came to Cumberland to work on a teaching degree. Josephine Pearson is the leading anti-suffrage activist in the state of Tennessee. She has vowed to her mother on her mother's deathbed that women should never have the right to vote. It would make them unfeminine. She wanted to keep women pure and out of the political arena. Again, I think that Cumberland connection is really kind of an interesting one. Cornelia Ford, we're going to go a little bit forward. Born in that same era, so she's born in 1919. Cornelia Ford was born in Nashville. She is a rather elite Nashville woman. She attends private schools. She attends Ward Belmont College. She goes to Sarah Lawrence for her bachelor's degree. And she becomes the first woman in Tennessee to become a flight instructor. We're not all that far removed from actually the invention of the airplane, if you think about it here. All right, those of you that had class with me today, Cornelia Ford was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. She was in the air flying a plane with a trainee pilot, a male trainee pilot, when she watches the Japanese fly in and drop bombs on Pearl Harbor. She's able to land the plane successfully, but it's a very close call. She says that she saw, quote, saw something detach itself from a plane and come glistening down. My heart turned over convulsively when the bomb exploded in the middle of the harbor. She writes in her logbook, flight interrupted by Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. She gets this reputation as a hero. She continues her work training pilots, because women pilots weren't allowed to fly in wartime, so she's just training the male pilots. Again, she's good enough to teach them how to do it, but not good enough to do it herself. She does become a member of the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, or the WAFs, which was a civilian group adjunct to the Army to fly military aircraft from place to place. So she's serving stateside. In March 1943, she is killed in a training accident when her trainee pilot crashes into her, and she is killed. Again, she's 24 years old at this point. She is the first woman pilot to die in active service in American history. Then we get some entertainers. We've gotten to the World War II period. Let's move on into the 1950s. Now, entertaining women in Tennessee, I could have picked from literally thousands of names. Names like Tammy Wynette, Loretta Lynn, Patsy Cline, but I picked Dinah Shore. Dinah Shore was born in Winchester, moved to Nashville as a child, and she attended Hume Fogg High School in Nashville. She had suffered from polio, which left her with a limp, but she wanted to be an entertainer. She was very interested in singing, and after high school, she moves to New York City. She wants to become a singer. She becomes a very famous, well-known American singer of the 1950s. She becomes an early television host. She has variety shows on TV from the 1950s throughout the 1970s. And Dinah Shore really is one of these people that, to me, personifies the girl next door. She is the ideal woman of the 1950s. In stark contrast to what Dinah Shore is doing in the 50s and 60s, we have another Hume Fogg High School graduate. We have Betty Page. Just a few years younger than Dinah Shore, Betty Page also grew up in Nashville and attended Hume Fogg. And like Dinah Shore, she wants to be an actress, a movie star, an entertainer in some way, and she also moves to New York City. It is there that their paths diverge widely. Betty Page's path is not the same as Dinah Shore's. She is noticed. She becomes a model, primarily for pinups, bathing suit pictures, scantily clad pictures. But then she will work in more lucrative but maybe less acceptable kinds of photography, including bondage pictures and bondage films. She does not do porn, no matter what you've heard. She was not a porn star, but she does do a lot of risque modeling. She is Miss January 1955 in Playboy magazine. She is wearing a Santa hat. She's wearing a Santa hat, period. But not long after that, about 4 years after that, she goes to a Billy Graham crusade and becomes an evangelical Christian. And she leaves her modeling career behind because you can't really do those two things very well at the same time. I think in part because of this vast change in lifestyle, but also because of some childhood trauma. She does have a mental breakdown. She is hospitalized, and she kind of falls off the radar for most of the 60s and into the 70s. Her pictures are rediscovered in the 1980s, and she becomes kind of this cult star without knowing it, really. But she does, a lawyer kind of finds her, and she's able to then make some money off of her career at the end of her life. She's very, very controversial during her lifetime, but I like to talk about her here because I do think she's one of these very early icons for women's kind of body positivity and independence, and she's just a woman ahead of her time. And then we have the Olympians, women who have received medals in the Olympics from the state of Tennessee. It seems like a good thing to talk about since Title IX is in the news so much lately. Wilma Rudolph was born in the Clarksville area. She attended segregated schools in Clarksville. She also suffered from polio, which left her with a limp that she worked to overcome, and by the age of 12, she was able to walk and run normally. Her parents were very, very involved with her treatment, bringing her to Nashville, to hospitals, using massage, using physical therapy. She actually becomes pregnant as a high school student, gives birth to a daughter. But while she's still in high school, she plays on the basketball team, she runs track, and she gets noticed by coaches at Tennessee State University, who recruit her to come to camps at Tennessee State while she's still in high school. It is while she is still a high school student, she represents the United States at the Summer Games in 1956. She was 15 years old, 15 or 16 years old. She wins a bronze medal at the Olympics as a teenager. She's then recruited to attend Tennessee State on a track scholarship where she becomes a member of the world famous Tiger Bell track team, and returns to the 1960 Olympics where she'll win 3 gold medals. And she's the first American woman to win 3 gold medals at any Olympics. In the 60s, becoming an Olympic champion did not mean that you got fame and fortune. She returns back to Tennessee and she becomes a school teacher in Clarksville. She does not really translate this to lots and lots of money. But she does work for the desegregation of Clarksville's public schools, and she will go around the country raising money for children's charities, particularly for children that have had disabilities like her polio disability. She dies of brain cancer in 1994. The woman in the middle is Tracy Calkins, another Nashvilleian. She was actually born in Minnesota but moved as a child to Nashville. Her father was her swim coach and a well-known swim coach in Nashville. And she decides watching TV that she wants to go to the Olympics. And so she begins training to go to the Olympics. And I mean, I don't know how many of you all did this, but when I was a kid, I wanted to go to the Olympics too. But I did not train nearly as hard as Tracy Calkins did, nor did I have any sort of athletic ability. But at the age of 15, she wins world medals at the 1978 World Championships, and she is awarded the Sullivan Medal, which is the medal given to the nation's best amateur athlete. She's only the second Tennessean to get the award. The first one was Wilma Rudolph. So they've both now been named the nation's best amateur athlete. She plans on going to the 1980 Olympics, which the United States boycotts because of the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1980. So she has her dreams deferred. She is not able to go to the Olympics, and she's gonna have to put it off for 4 years. She's kind of like, well, will I still be the same swimmer in 4 years? She begins training for the 1984 Olympics, and she wins 3 gold medals in 1984. She will marry another Olympic swimmer. He is from Australia, and they still live in Australia today. They have twin children. And then I hope you all know a little bit about Pat Head Summit. Also born kind of in the Clarksville area. She grew up on a farm outside of Clarksville. She went to UT Martin where she played basketball. She played on the 1976 Women's Olympic basketball team. That was the first year that women's basketball was an Olympic sport, and they won a silver medal. They planned on returning in 1980, but again, that's the year we boycotted the Summer Games, so she did not get to participate in another Olympics. She becomes the coach of the women's Olympic team in 1984. That team does win a gold medal, but coaches don't get medals. So she did not receive an Olympic gold medal. However, she becomes the coach of the University of Tennessee Lady Vols. They win 8 national championships. And she is awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama, not long before her death in 2016. Sports Illustrated magazine has called these three women 3 of the top 4 Tennessee athletes of all time. Wilma Rudolph is number 1, Pat Hitt-Summit was number 2, Reggie White was number 3, Tracy Calkins was number 4, Steve Spurrier was number 5. So that just kind of tells you where they are in the pantheon of Tennessee women, or Tennessee women's sports figures. Now, I could have talked about any of these other people too. Lots of these in particular are entertainers. There's so many more Tennessee women that are so important, not just to us locally or in our state, but to our national history, our national culture. Authors, poets, singers, actors, politicians, activists. Where is she? Ray Seddon is an astronaut from Murfreesboro. But I hope that we can be inspired by all of these women to, they were just like us. They were born here and decided to make a difference in their communities and in their nation. So as we celebrate women's history, let's think about some of these people, and I appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you all.
Do you want to take some questions?
I can take questions. I can't promise I have answers, but we can see what we got. Or if y'all need to get to class or somewhere else, that's okay too. There's food, there's water, there's coffee, so,